Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports. This is sort of an impromptu video as we've got reports of a big cat sighting. Adam Larsson reportedly signing a 4-year extension with, did I say reportedly or reportedly? Oh, goodness. You can tell I've been out of video at least for a while. Adam Larsson reportedly signing a 4-year extension at about 5.25 AAV. I'm sure we'll get exact terms here and there soon, RJ. I'm obviously joined, as I say it, and you've got the nice flag in the background, by my friend RJ from Emerald City Hockey. We're getting closer to hockey. I'm sure you're excited about that. RJ, just your initial thoughts on this, maybe what you thought when you saw Vince Dunn's tweet. Is that's actually how the wheel started turning on this? Vince Dunn tweeted 4 cat emojis. And then we got a few reports from journalists or reporters about the potential details, and this might be done anywhere from tonight as we record this to sometime tomorrow. So, RJ, what are your thoughts just on this deal for Larson initially?
Well, first off, I love how this news broke with Vince Dunn tweeting the 4 cat emojis. And of course, he would be the one to break the news, right? Those two have been attached to the hip pretty much since the end of the Kraken's first season. And so it makes sense that he's the one to break the news. I'm sure Lars probably told him first that he would be sticking around. And so I love that. As for analyzing the contract itself, I look at the big picture first because going into this past offseason, there was a lot of uncertainty long term on the Kraken blue line. Really, you just had Vince Dunn under contract long term, and then not a whole lot beyond that. You had Alexiak for 2 years. But as far as other guys, there was a lot of uncertainty. And so you sign Brandon Montour for 7 years, and now he's locked up as a long-term part of this blue line. And now you have Adam Larsson signed for another 5 years now, 4-year extension, plus this 1 year that's still left on his previous contract. And all of a sudden, the top four is pretty consistent, locked in, at least for the next couple years. And so I think this is Ron Francis taking care of things ahead of time and basically doing next offseason's work right now.
And something that I didn't really think about, and I'm not super concerned about. Are you worried at all about if this may stunt anything with Will Borgen? Because what was it, a year or two ago, he did sign a mini extension to keep him around. He's obviously seen his workload and his just skill has grown since we've obviously seen him in Kraken Blue. Are you concerned at all about this maybe holding just at all in relation to? I don't think it really impacts him too much. Truthfully, maybe I could see where there's some concern about him maybe not moving up, in the order more. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, and maybe it creating potential issues down the line?
Well, in the short term, I don't think this extension really impacts Will Borgen that much. Really, it was bringing in Brandon Montour in the offseason. And you look at the right-handed D, Borgen's pretty solidly third in the pecking order at this point. And so I don't think there's a whole lot of room for him to move up, barring an injury or something. But I do think long term, this actually has major ramifications for whether Will Borgen returns to the Kraken or not. So Borgen has 1 year left on his deal. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of it. And if you look at the Kraken's overall situation on the blue line now, as I mentioned, you've got those 4 guys locked up. You've got Dunn, you've got Montour, you've got Alexiak, and now you've got Adam Larsson locked up for at least the next season. And you've got Riker Evans under team control. He's going to be part of the team long term. And so you have those 5. And the Kraken right now, they have the 6th most money committed to their top 4 defensemen in the NHL, a little over $24 million. That's a lot of money, plus whatever Riker Evans is going to cost. And so if you're looking at maybe giving an offer to Will Borgen, one, how much money can you really afford to offer him given what else you have locked in on the blue line? And also, if you're Will Borgen, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. He's going to be free to go anywhere. Are the Kraken really going to be able to offer him the most money and opportunity? And I just think there's got to be some other team out there that's going to like that blend of size and, still some skill on the blue line as well. That'll probably offer more in terms of money and opportunity.
Yeah, so that's why yeah, in the long term, I can see that making sense, and especially if I'm not wrong, in a little bit, you've got Riker to pay. I mean, Shane will also be coming to pay at some point too. So, I mean, you're going to be in some interesting situations, and like you said, there's opportunity, not only opportunity but also money wise. That's going to be a problem, and So I guess unfortunately in that regard, it doesn't look super great. Um, just this was something too as well. You think about it, there was all the concerns about throwing the term um, and to some extent the money at guys like Stevenson specifically for that last part, but the term in Stevenson and Montour. Are you concerned with Ron Francis kind of handing out this sort of money and this length to some of the folks that are over 30? Is that something that you're worrying about, or what are your thoughts on that? Because that's another long term thing, right? In the moment, the goal is to compete right now. I know that's been the talk. You need to compete this year. The playoffs are the goal, just with outside factors and all that. And you do have some guys who are getting older. Jordan Eberle's not in the prime of his career. Jaden Schwartz, who knows how long he plays longer, right? So just your thoughts on that, because it is somewhat interesting. Um, and I mean, it doesn't necessarily give you a ton of flexibility down the line, obviously.
Right. And you know, I'm always concerned about the aging curves and especially signing players over 30. I'm always wary of that. So I think it's a good question to ask. And yeah, this is for Larsson's age, what, 32 to 36 seasons, 33 to 36 seasons. And so you are getting some probably not prime years from Adam Larsson. But I will say this contract doesn't bother me as much or doesn't worry me as much as some of those other deals like a Chandler Stevenson or even a Brandon Montour, because you look at the type of players, particularly defensemen, that really can fall off in their mid to late 30s. And usually it's offensive production. It's somebody that's either as a blue liner creating a lot of offense there that tends to go down, or for forwards, especially, you know, just their production tends to go down when they're in their 30s. Defensive defensemen tend to age just a little bit better than some of those other players. And so that's where I'm okay with the term on this deal. Look, I don't love it, but I think that's the kind of term you have to arrive at to get the deal done. And I think it's going to age just fine as Larsson kind of gradually works his way down the depth chart. And maybe by the last year of that deal, he's a third pairing defenseman and you are overpaying him. But overall, it's going to be worth it on the whole. And also, we'll see what the bonus situation is and all of that. But you might be able to buy out that final year too, should it come to that.
And so in that regard, I mean, I know with things are tight right now, cap space wise, right? I mean, I don't think this doesn't necessarily affect you right now, right? I don't imagine that Ron's going to have to go and do anything in the immediate term.
Well, the
Um,
contract doesn't kick in until next year anyway, the
yeah,
extension.
yeah. And well, even in that regard, this might be better for another time. But considering where the Kraken are at with a few $1,000s, I mean, do you imagine anything they're going to have to do anything? Maybe in training camp or after training camp, or is that like something they're just going to have to manage to the wire?
Well, no, in short, yes, they are going to have to do something. And it's something I talked about on our podcast earlier today. Somebody has to go. There is not enough flexibility left. The Kraken have a little over $4,000 in cap space right now, and that's with a 21-man roster. So that's just one extra player beyond the guys who are on the ice playing. And that just does not provide you with enough flexibility. If even one person gets hurt and has to go to injured reserve, all of a sudden you can't afford a call up. It's just not really a tenable situation in the long term. Technically they are under the cap, so they can go into the season just fine, but somebody's going to have to get moved, whether it's now at the start of training camp, mid training camp, or even early into the season. Maybe you can keep that situation going for a week or two, but it's not something you want to spend any kind of significant amount of time with that as the case.
Sorry, I got a little off track there from what we were talking about, but especially with you and to your credit, of course, with RJ, with what you guys do with the podcast and with your armchair GM stuff, it's always a lot of fun to hear how the money works. I had to learn. I'm so used to, the NFL contracts, and there would be contracts where you can mess around with that, and then RJ had to. He's like, you cannot restructure these. I was like, oh, this is a hard reality to learn about. So I always like learning about that and playing around with now Puckpedia, right? But we'll get back to the big cat in this one. Just as you're another guy. Obviously, we both cover this team on the ground, boots to the ground kind of thing. How big, because for some hockey fans, maybe casual Kraken fans, you look at Adam Larsson, you know the guy. There's the memes, all that. He's been here, since day one. But just the importance of his consistency, whether it be the Iron Man streak, and I'll find wood to knock on, now, right? Or the leadership standpoint, because I know he's not the guy who likes to talk a lot. He hides his smiles and all that, but just so often throughout the course of the 3 seasons that this franchise has been around, you do hear about Lars and his leadership and what he means to these players, specifically Vince Dunn, who we talked about at the beginning. So, are you able to put into some words just what he brings? Obviously, there's on the on ice, just what he brings as a defenseman, and the occasional big cat goal that we love. Um, but just in terms of his consistency in that leadership aspect, why the little bit of a pay bump that he's getting is so well deserved.
Right. Well, first off, he's someone that you can count on being in the lineup basically every night, I guess, unless his wife is giving birth to a child. You can count on him being in the lineup, and that's something that's huge for you. And especially as he gets older, I think he plays the game in a way and treats his body in a way that he's going to be all right and he's going to hold up okay, even though he does block a lot of shots, even though he does take some contact, he should be all right there. And then as far as off the ice, he is a major leader on the blue line, and he doesn't talk a whole lot to the media compared to some of those other guys, but really he's one of those leaders that is just so huge in the room among the players. And I think that's where he really makes an impact, whether it's Vince Dunn, as you mentioned, or even Riker Evans, when Vince Dunn was out for an extended stretch, kind of taking Evans under his wing as a D pair and working with those younger guys. And he's one of those players that, again, you won't hear a ton from him in interviews and whatnot, but ask any other player about him and they will tell you how much of a leader he is in the room. Also, how funny he is too. You can't underestimate that, right? I mean, ask all the Kraken players. I bet he's the most common answer as far as who's the funniest guy in the room. And we've heard it a couple times too, just as we're hanging around waiting for an interview, he'll come by and make a really great comment. So I think it's hard to, put a dollar amount on what that brings to a room. But I think he's certainly someone they're all going to be happy that he's sticking around for a while.
Yeah, and bringing that into this discussion is important to me because there are still folks who will look at pure just the basic stat line and will go, I don't know if this stat line equals this contract, right? And I'm like, it doesn't always, you can't put it like you were talking about. You can't put a dollar amount in those sort of things, but I think it is somewhat invaluable, like you were talking about, a guy like Riker Evans, who you look at as one of your future defensemen of obviously the present and the future as well, right? And someone who it would be really cool to hear, like, if he could put it into his own words, what Vince Dunn, what Adam Larsson has meant to his career, and his time in Seattle. So I always like talking about that because I really am not a fan of just looking at the basic stat line that I can find just Googling Adam Larsson's name. I just don't think that's, comparable or how you should view these things. And then, talking about that, what you were talking about, what he brings to the locker room is how I want to end this. I know that the captain debate is always very popular among the fans around the NHL, and then obviously, I don't think we talk about it in our media circle in the Kraken. I don't think that's really much of a discussion personally. I could be forgetting. I am old at 23, but your thoughts on this? Maybe there's a C here because there's been a bunch of theories, right, that the Kraken are saving this for Matty Beniers. Maybe Jordan Eberle gets one since he re-upped here. Just in terms of it potentially being Adam Larsson, you sign him for 4 more years. That could give him time to hold the C down for a few years, and then maybe you get Matty in there, or hell, maybe Shane takes it at some point. Just regardless of other outside factors of those last two things, like Matty or Shane taking it eventually, what would you think about, like, we wake up the day of rookie camp of day one later this week and we get this in our inbox that Adam Larsson's been named captain? What would you think about that? How would you feel about it? Would it make sense? All that sort of thing.
Well, it's an interesting scenario that you posed, and if I got that email the first day of rookie camp on Thursday, 3 days from now, or 2 days from now, whatever it is, that Adam Larsson is been named captain for rookie camp, I would not like that news. But let me explain why. Because I think Larsson is as good a choice as anybody to be the captain. I think I don't know that he really enjoys the media side of things, that he'd have to do a lot more necessarily. I think he'd be okay at it. I think he'd be good at it, but the reason I wouldn't like that choice is just because my one hope for the captain search, and I think they are going to name a captain before the season starts. I'd be surprised if they didn't. I hope that it is kind of an open competition throughout training camp. I want to see somebody step up throughout training camp. You get that whole sample size and then you pick somebody. What I'm hoping is that it hasn't been already pre-anointed, whether that's Adam Larsson or Jordan Eberle or anybody. I really wouldn't like to see that announcement on Thursday that anybody in particular had been named captain. I want to give it training camp. I want to see who steps up and who really earns that role. So that's the reason I wouldn't like the announcement. Now, if at the end of training camp or right before the start of the season, I see the announcement, Adam Larsson's been named captain, I love it. I think that's great. I think he's a really good leader in the locker room. He's as good a choice as anybody. So that I would be okay to see. And also that would tell me that probably it wasn't just predetermined or whatever, that he probably did step up during training camp. So I think he'd be a fine choice for captain. I don't know that he would love that role maybe as much as like say a Jordan Eberle, who, is always happy talking to us a ton. And, there really are a lot of demands on you as a captain. And I know Larsson can be a little on the quieter side sometimes, but I think he would certainly thrive in the teammate facing part of that role. And I think it would be a good sign for the attributes that the team would be looking at in a captain if they were to choose him.
Yeah, okay, and that makes sense, just given that situation. Because I mean, part of it when those emojis came out, my knee-jerk reaction was, okay, you got to be re-upping the guy. Like we obviously with who it came from, it seemed like that was the case. But then my brain wanted to get a little more excited. I was like, all right, what else can we dig into here? Because we've been surprised before. I know you and Dylan have it almost feels like a sin not having Dylan here to talk about Adam. I'm sorry, Dylan.
I'm taking I did text him plenty after this night. I'm taking a few of the points that he made and echoing them here. So we are getting a little bit of Dylan's thoughts on this, even if it's just through me.
No, and I'm sure we'll be talking to Dylan, both of us soon, maybe in something like this. We'll work on it. But yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense just to want to go through something and have it be a proving ground. I just, with the even last season, I know towards the end of the year, because we can see Ron Francis's office from where we sit as media. There was a meeting towards the end of the season when I think they had a small chance of making the playoffs still, but they hadn't officially been mathematically eliminated. Um, and it was your alternate captains and a few guys who were leaders but didn't have letters. And I know Lars. I just wonder, if you could be a fly on the wall and hear about some of these things. No one's really talked about the captaincy. I mean, people ask about it, but none of the players really nominate anybody. So, having it be a proving ground makes the most sense because there are guys. I mean, the NHL posted a thing the other day. They were like, I think it was McCann. I think Jordan was in there. There's another Kraken player that I'm forgetting. And then it was Brandon Montour. And I was like, I don't know how the dynamics of bringing in a new guy and giving them the C would be, right? So,
I actually
yeah,
wouldn't mind it. I
really.
talked about it on the podcast a little bit earlier today. I wouldn't mind it.
Well, I got to catch up. Shoot, I'm interested. I
I
don't
can
know.
go into that if you right now if you'd like, but I don't know if we're pressed for time or what.
Oh, I'm good if you are. I was just trying to be respectful of RJ's time here.
Oh,
Um,
I could talk about hockey forever. All right. Well, in short, I think that it actually wouldn't be the worst decision. Again, I want it to be an open competition. I think naming Montour the captain right now would be a mistake before
yeah.
training camp. But I think it wouldn't be the worst thing to have somebody in there who wasn't around last year, given kind of the failures in the culture and the leadership and
Um,
the effort. Basically, anyone who was around last year was part of that. And maybe they didn't feel
yes.
empowered that they could kind of step up or say something, but whoever it was, they didn't, right? And that's why I have a little
Right.
bit of a hesitation about Jordan Eberle because he is as respected as anybody in that locker room. Can't question that whatsoever. But you look at last season with things going off the rails, and that's something that he could have done. And either that means that he didn't step up and say anything. He kind of let the situation get as bad as it got, or he
Right.
did step up and say something, and the guys didn't respond. I think either of those is
Right.
probably a bad sign. So I would hope that it would work out
Okay.
if it was someone like Eberle or someone who was there last season, but it just gives me a little bit of pause. And so I think if we get the announcement at the end of training camp, Brandon Montour named the new captain, like, what is this? And the new guy, I think that might be a reason why that is possible.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And now that you think about it, that kind of reignites my thoughts on this because this has been a discussion from since Mark Giordano was traded, right? Because he had the C for half the season, goes to Toronto, all that. You haven't had a C since then. I mean, that makes sense. There were the losing streaks, the games that really mattered for you last season that could have been turning points where you needed to stop the bleeding with whether it was a skid. You never really went on a super big heater. I think you had maybe one long winning streak last year. Yeah, if there was the guy on that roster to step up to say, hey, this is enough. I was going to use bad words. I got to remember what I'm doing. There was a guy that was going to step up and say, this is enough. We need to be better. We need to demand more of ourselves, or to go and there are folks who, in the aspects of a captain, I think there are folks who have certain aspects, but not all of them. I think Jared McCann often goes and leads by example. He's not a guy that should be fighting, but how many times do we, whether it was you guys on post game or conversations we've had where he's had to stick up for himself, that you don't want your goal scorer going and dropping the mitts. I mean, but he does that and nobody stood up. Well, in that instance too, where were people standing up for your guys getting beat up? Like, I just think that I think there are folks who have strong voices. I think there are folks who lead by example in their play. I don't think there's anybody that has all of that put together quite yet. Um, so yeah, that's why I just don't like talking about the captaincy because I don't think it's there yet. I don't think Maddie's there yet. There was that discussion after he finally got his deal done, right? I don't think that's there. And so sure, Brandon Montour, I mean, a guy who's been around, he's won a Stanley Cup. I don't know. We'll have to revisit this, I guess, after camp. But yeah, that's why I just kind of try to ignore the captain questions and comments when it surrounds this team. And it's interesting because I really don't have to deal with this in any other sport. Like baseball doesn't really name a C. No one else, besides the NFL, where they do have the C. No one else does that. You know.
It's not quite the same though, is it?
No, no, not
You have
really.
a
I
C on
mean,
offense, you got a C on defense, you got
you have to
multiple
see on
team
special
captains.
teams. Yeah. Am I
Yeah.
listening to Jason Myers when we're down by a touchdown? I don't think so. But yeah, that's just my take on it. I'm sure you do, as well, because again, I'm sure you guys deal with it, So yeah, that's my thoughts on it. But that, unless you've got any further thoughts on Adam Larsson, because I mean, at least in terms of how we deal with him as media, everything that came about with this was really funny. There's still a sticker of this by the loading dock for the Kraken around CPA. I mean, he's been a joy to cover. He's not super, like you talked about. It's not really boisterous or jovial or anything like that. But when you do get him, it is interesting to kind of see what he talks about, when he's honest about things. Um, I
And
don't
I
know.
will, I do
He's
want to say
fun.
one more thing too, because I may have framed it earlier like that he didn't, love the media stuff and wasn't, look, he
Oh,
doesn't do
sure.
a whole lot of scrums. But one thing I will say is when you do get to talk to him one on one or you have specific questions for him and kind of in that setting, he always gives really good, thoughtful answers. And that's, the kind of guy he is. I think he's just, better in that one on one type situation rather than in like the big media scrum with all the lights and the cameras in your face and everything. So that's kind of more what I meant by that. And he, he always is willing to, give his time and answer questions thoughtfully.
Oh yeah, no, and yeah, if that needs any sort of backing up, like there have been so many times in scrums where I think we try to get him to smile. I think there was one where you might have asked him about someone trying to get him to smile, and he actually broke out into a full grin. So yeah, no, Lars is great. I mean, in terms of that aspect of media covering him wise, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, just in terms of to wrap it up, in terms of term, you get a guy. I mean, unless he decides to play it well, when you frame it about how he plays, but you're going to get him for the good years that he'll have remaining, unless he does something incredible and has like LeBron's playing career wise length. The with the cap, it's just a nice pay boost for him. I just think this works out in a lot of regards, and we'll obviously get the little tiny details when we get the official release. But I mean, this just makes a lot of sense, for the team, I think. So, with that, RJ, I appreciate you coming on. It'll be great when we get to rookie camp and we can actually get back into covering this team for real this time, and we're not waiting every few weeks for news or for you guys to drop a podcast and essentially jinx news to come out like that. So it's great. Do you want to plug anything that you guys are doing? This is your chance to do that.
All right, well, just do the quick plugs. We got the Deep Dive podcast. That's a weekly podcast on all things Kraken. You can follow us on social media at Emerald City HKY. And yeah, that's where you can find us.
Perfect. Thank you, RJ. And we will see you at rookie. Gosh, what time is rookie camp? At the end of the week? I already forgot.
It's Thursday, Friday.
12th, 13th. Perfect.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Jen.
Hey. Where are you going to watch all those Kraken away games?
Kraken away games, making a push. I was thinking of coming here just because Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports, only if that's okay with you.
I mean, I love that idea. Hope to see you here.